Hey, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Friday edition of Practical Show Tech. We're back on the hot topic of RF. We can't stray very far. We try to take a week off from one topic or another, but we come back to those things that we're most passionate about, and obviously, RF is something that not only this group of presenters are very passionate about, but our audience. We've learned that in the last 2 months of COVID webinaring, that RF, it's not going anywhere. And one of the interesting things we're finding today is that, and we'll talk about this a little later on in the episode, and that is, I think there's going to be new opportunity for us to think differently about being in front of racks or behind racks or remotely viewing things. And we need to start thinking like the IT professionals that have been spending the last 15 years working remotely, right? Maybe they were down the hall from their rack, or maybe they were across the globe. And that takes a little more thought. That we have to think differently. We're used to being right there at our racks, doing what we have, seeing certain things, and we've got some opportunities, and a lot of the tools we're going to talk about today, specifically from RF Venue, have a degree of that component in it, but also they should cause us to think about, how do I look at spectrum, right? We did a topic around smart last week, and with smart, we're doing exactly that. We're looking at frequencies, right? Well, here we're just looking at a little higher frequency, right? But the concepts are still hold true, that we need the same tools to look at that. And I know it runs kind of counter to being in a down market and everybody's watching their nickels and dimes. I know I sure am. I'm not trying to buy any more than I need to. But at the same time, how do I have the tools that I need to be ready, to be proficient when that time comes? So harder topics to deal with. So we're gonna take the funner stuff though and just talk about RF for a while. But before we do, Mac, Pete, here we are. It's Friday already.
Yeah.
Hard
Another
to
week.
believe. Oh my goodness.
Amazing how that flies by in only 7 days.
Yeah, I know. And only 7 days ago, can you believe it was Friday? I can't believe it. But today we're joined by Chris and Don from RF Venue. Thanks, guys, for coming on. Before we get into the presentation, you know what we got to do. Yes, it's Mac's turn to tell us all how this is going to happen today. This is a pretty popular topic, Mac. So I think we can expect
everybody
quite
wants
a
to
bit
know
of
about
Q&A.
Q&A.
Right?
Yeah.
And we want to address those things, right? That's part of what we enjoy about this platform. So why don't you talk people through some of your suggestions? Maybe you've refined this one over this week, I think, too. Any notes, thoughts?
And I think we're pretty close to where we were last week. If you go to your GoToWebinar control panel, down toward the bottom of it, there's a tab called Questions, and you just click the little down arrow to open that up, and there will be a box where you can type your question in. We hope we get lots of questions, because that's really what drives webinars, is the interaction and getting questions. So put your questions in there. Only we will see the questions. The other attendees will not see the questions. And please be specific in your questions, because the webinar is going to run for about 2 hours, and the questions are not going to be answered the moment you ask them, or the comments won't be responded to the moment you enter them. So unless you are clear about what you're asking about or commenting about, there will be no way to understand what you're trying to say. So please be specific, but get your questions in when you think of them. And as we come to good points, we'll answer questions. Toward the end, we will also ask for you to suggest topics that you would like to see in the future as we go forward. Giving the topics that the audience is actually looking for is something we'd like to do. So when the webinar is over, we will leave some time at the end for people to add suggestions. If you add them during the run of the show, it's going to be hard to find them. So please wait till the end, and then please then give suggestions for topics that you would like to see in the future. Pete?
Well, I was watching a little show on Sunday morning TV, and it was about this little train. He said, "I think I can, I think I can, I think I can." Well, this is what about RF is all about. I think I can, I think I can. So these are some of the tools that are absolutely essential to doing RF, and really happy to have both Chris and Don on, because these tools I sort of live by, and some of the tricks to fix your problems, like specialized antennas and stuff like that, they also have. Besides the putting your ideas in at the end, if you have to leave and want to leave an idea, just say hashtag idea and put your idea in the questions. And also, there is a handout, which is this deck we're going to be looking at here, if you want to download that deck, and that will also be available with the video along with all the questions. So Kelly, Chris, Don, Mac, go for it.
Yeah, thanks guys. Why don't you take it on away, and we'll be standing by for all those Q&A points.
Great. Well, I appreciate the invite. You know, this has been a really cool series. I have to go back and look at some of the earlier ones. I caught some others, and yeah, it's good to kind of, you know, be digging in here with this particular group. You know, we've been doing a weekly webinar series for a while. You know, hopefully people aren't experiencing webinar fatigue at this point, but it's been good for us to keep the conversation going. It's not really a great time to be putting a hard sell on anybody. And we've always kind of, you know, our business has really always been focused around content and education and teaching people things and connecting expert users with people that maybe aren't so experienced. And so this has just been kind of a continuation of things that we've already done, you know, in this particular environment we're in. So today we're going to look at spectrum analysis tools from RF Venue, and then we're going to walk through some of the software platforms that are, you know, that touch some of this spectrum analysis hardware, and then just kind of think through some of the application side where, you know, okay, I've got my hands on a scan or a spectrum analyzer or some software or whatever. How does this impact getting good audio out of the system? Because at the end of the day, they don't really give out medals for, you know, best RF signal to noise. So what I'm going to do is just walk through a presentation. It's probably, you know, I know you guys said 2 hours, but I think the ideal sort of PowerPoint section of this is more like 45 minutes to an hour. And then we can kind of open the floor to these questions. And, you know, guys, if there's stuff that comes up along the way or we want to dwell on something further, you know, don't hesitate to jump in. And likewise, Don, if you have any color commentary, please let me know. So to start, what do we do? We make products that make mics, wireless mics and in-ears work and sound better. At the end of the day, that's what this stuff does. We got into this business a little over 10 years ago after working in wired microphones, you know, acoustics, transducers, where signal to noise, you know, quality audio is what it's all about. And then after we exited that business, we started to look more closely into wireless, and we're understanding the spectrum changes and demand increases that we were seeing for wireless channel counts, and a big gap in the middle where accessory products, other tools that could interface with those systems were kind of lacking to try to make life a little bit easier as the operating environment got more challenging. But we sort of distill it. This is what we're all about. Now, the backdrop for this, of course, is the spectrum changes that we've been seeing. So everybody's pretty aware of this by now. I think particularly this audience, that we've got an increase in demand for wireless. We've got spectrum that's being reallocated all over the place. And you know, these low power audio systems are really adversely affected by that. So how do we allow people to do more with less, basically? And then there's the sort of looming boogeyman of, you know, new classes of devices entering, be they 600 meg band mobile devices, or, you know, white space devices, or whatever may come down the pike as things change. So, you know, whereas some years ago you could kind of set up a, you know, 8-channel, 12-channel mic system, you know, push your easy button on the front of it and sync them all up and, you know, fire it up and be ready to go, is not really what things look like anymore. And, you know, we also work with a lot of customers in churches, theaters, schools that, you know, the traditional core of the wireless market, not necessarily high channel count, you know, tours or stadium production, or, you know, TV, multi-studio facilities, where all of a sudden, you know, you need to level up your game here in order to put on a quality event. So it's a little bit of a backdrop of where we're at. The product line from RF Venue is sort of batched into 3 categories. Our remote antennas, like the Diversity Fin, which is pretty popular. It's a polarization diversity antenna. And then you've got the signal distribution products that will route your signal from, you know, point A to point B, splitting, combining, fiber conversion, all that. And then spectrum analysis and software is sort of the third bucket of tools that we offer, and that's kind of where we're going to be looking today. And you know, this is probably well known among this audience, but you know, we've created this space in between the incumbent manufacturers, where we can interface with any system, a mix of brands, mix of different wireless systems, and really improve outcomes without, you know, a massive budget requirement to get it done. So that's the sort of 3 kind of main areas that we're in, and we'll now, you know, jump in and take a little bit of a closer look at spectrum analysis and what we have there. So over the last, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 months, we've been kind of shifting our spectrum tools under the sort of RF Explorer Pro Audio brand, and that includes a handheld spectrum analyzer, a remote spectrum analyzer tool, which you see on the right there, which is sort of the evolution of our Wave Tower hardware. We kind of split the brands at this point, where the hardware tools are RF Explorer Pro Audio, and then the software side of things is now Wave Tower. So if you're familiar with Wave Tower or our Vantage software or RF Explorer in general, these things may look similar, and it's really been a consolidation of those things. And we're starting to now embark on taking those spectrum analysis capabilities from really standalone spectrum analyzer products like a handheld analyzer or a remote analyzer, and starting to bake them into other products. So our Distro 9 HDR is a 9-channel antenna distribution system for wireless mics. Now has a remote network card that you can have built on it, so that you can just add this capability directly into your rack. So instead of having a separate tool, it's sort of built into the existing infrastructure that you need to run your wireless system. So to elaborate that a little bit further, the RF Explorer Pro Audio side being the hardware, the Wave Tower software is the interface for these tools. The Wave Tower Cloud being a browser-based system that works with the remote tool, and the Wave Tower for Mac, which is the newest version of our Vantage software, which is a really popular Mac-based interface for RF Explorer systems. And so that's kind of the backdrop of those tools. So I'm just going to run through this relatively quickly. I'm sure most people have run across an RF Explorer in their day, or have other Spectrum tools that they've seen on shows or looked at. The RF Explorer Pro Audio Edition is a really handy and affordable, wide operating range spectrum analyzer that is great at looking at RF for audio systems. So the handheld unit is compatible with the Wave Tower for Mac software, and then it's got a number of different features on board, handheld as like a tool in the bag, to look at spectrum from 15 up to almost 3 gig. And so having a tool that is really well designed to look at the area that you're interested in, rather than a really wideband, higher end, much more expensive tool, has been a big advantage in audio, because it's really brought a lot more people into spectrum analysis in general as part of a workflow. So there's some interesting aspects about this that's a little bit different than the other RF Explorer. It's got a BNC input instead of an SMA. There's a nice Wi-Fi mode on this for looking at channels in 2.4, and then some low noise amplifiers and attenuators and some other things that are available on there as well. The screens, the interface of this unit is pretty basic in terms of the different things it can do. There's not really a steep learning curve, which I've always appreciated. When you sit down in front of a $12,000 Keysight spectrum analyzer, it's got incredible horsepower, but it's not really terribly intuitive to the average audio tech. And so this is kind of a nice balance between ease of use and access versus having like a pretty substantial installation on your desk when you're working with these RF systems. So you basically could jump between Wi-Fi and spectrum analyzer mode, and then the very basic view, and this is the same view you would see on other spectrum analyzers, where you've got your signal level in dBm on the y-axis, and then your scan range in megahertz on the x-axis. So everybody's fairly familiar with this look. There's a whole bunch of different indicators on here in terms of how the unit is configured, but fundamentally the setup is pretty consistent across spectrum analyzers that are on the market. So if you kind of gain some experience working with this particular unit, it transfers really well into other devices you might come across. It's kind of 3 primary configuration menus on this, and this will look similar to other RF Explorers if you already have one or you've seen others, where you're really looking at setting the unit up to scan either with a center frequency or with the frequency start and stop range. And then you've got various levels of attenuation and other details you can kind of dial in depending on what you're doing. In the majority of pro audio applications, you can really set this thing up to look at 470 to 608 or 400 to 700 or whatever, 900 VHF. Like, it's pretty easy to set this up to look at really what you care about, instead of having to kind of reconfigure it each time. And there's some handy presets that are available to do that. there's an attenuator and a preamp stage in here. If you're looking at, really quiet signals or low level signals or hotter signals, that you can also configure on this unit.
Can I cut for just 1 second? Just for those people that don't know, can you go back one slide?
Sure.
So you need to be aware if you want to start measuring transmitters or something, when you get much power up next to a scanner, the front ends are extremely sensitive and you run the risk of blowing up the front end of your scanner. So that 30 dB attenuator that's in there, that's there primarily for most people. So you could measure the output of your sticks or your belt packs, and to make sure everything's working the way it's supposed to. If you just turn a transmitter on up to a scanner that doesn't have the input attenuated, and you get pretty close to the antenna input for that scanner, like I said, you can have some bad things happen. So having that attenuator in there is very important if you want to try to measure some transmitters. And then the LNA, of course, is the same thing on the other end. If you're trying to measure stuff that's way down in the dirt, you're going to want to boost it up a little bit. So there's a 25 dB preamp that you can switch in essentially.
Chris,
Yeah.
we had a question of the previous slide as well. I'm sorry, go back to the spectrum analyzer. That one, is that a 1 second sweep? How do you, what's the sweep time on that?
This is 5 sweeps per second. If you look at that on the y-axis, that 5/s.
We got it.
Yep. And another thing, and that's a very good point that Don made, is that spectrum analyzers are sensitive. You can't monkey with these things the same way you can, in the audio world where you slam signal and, oh, okay, turn it down. Like, you could damage these things. And that goes for a $500 RF Explorer, the same way it goes for, a $15,000, Keysight or another high-end tool. They're sensitive and they're made a certain way, where overloading the front end or putting too much signal into them is really, really problematic. So in terms of looking at like transmit signals and that kind of thing, you can definitely do it, but the real kind of core capability for this unit, and I think a lot of spectrum analyzers, is understanding what signal is going into your wireless microphone rack. So looking at an output on, say, a distro, so that you're seeing exactly what the receivers are seeing, and you get a better understanding across the operating band, not just within the range of the particular receiver that you have on hand. Things that are out of band that you're not seeing that could be contributing noise within your range of interest. That's really where spectrum analysis comes in key, and where you can get a lot smarter about how you configure these systems. There's a pretty thorough manual on this thing in terms of like every screen, the settings, like how you can dial them in. My sort of preferred approach on this is to get into a set it and forget it type of mode where you load your presets. So there's a preset utility you could use to do this. You can also do it just directly on the device, where you say, all right, I got days I want to be looking at, or situations I want to be looking at VHF, I want to look at 900 band, I want to look at, UHF 2.4, whatever. I save them as presets, and you can just easily recall these without having to like type everything in, each time. And so I think that's been a really handy feature when, you're on the move, and you gotta get it done. Being able to jump around with that is really handy. So
there is a question about when you should use the 30 dB pad. Or do you need it when you're just putting your Explorer antenna near a transmitter antenna, or do you need it when you're directly connecting?
You definitely need it when you're directly connecting. My experience, if you're running a bunch of, and again, I go back to like our core customers, our core business, which is like a, 8 to 20 something channel system split between IEMs and wireless microphones. If you have a bunch of IEMs that are transmitting at 30, 20 dB, 20 mil, whatever it is, it's low power enough off of the, in terms of like path loss and everything to the input antenna on the RF Explorer, that you're not likely to fry your unit, walking around IEMs. It's really more when you're getting into much high powered stuff.
Or you're measuring it to actually measure the output of a transmitter.
Or you're actually piping in the transmit signal, correct, Pete? Yeah.
And that level, you may look at one particular frequency and it doesn't look very hot, but if you've got 8 carriers in that same unit, plugging that into your spectrum analyzer, even though it doesn't look very high, is quite powerful.
Right. And that's the whole, that's really the delineation between the receive and transmit sides, right? Where like the transmit side is a lot hairier than the receive side. If you've got a bunch of, wireless mic signals that are, minus, I don't know, 50, 60, minus, 40, 30, pretty manageable. If you've got a bunch of signals that are plus 20, 30, very different situation, both on the analysis side and on the coordination side, right? Because those relative differences are massive in terms of their impact on the overall spectrum.
Does your pad / amp setting remain from the last time you set it, or did it default to the pad when you start up?
It remains from the last setting. And so, out of the box, it defaults to 0. And those settings are recalled. So really, if you're playing around with the LNA or the attenuator sections, that's going to be not something you're going to want to like hold from show to show.
And that's what's so good about having the presets. The interface on this is about as much fun as programming your Roku. You're going one character at a time, so it takes a couple of minutes to change a preset. If you need to use 10 different presets, it's real easy beforehand to preset these things and then store them. You can recall them instantly, so you can go back and forth in a second. So over the course of doing a gig where you may want to look at 20 different things, it's going to save you a bunch of time to have those presets once you get them set up. And it's real easy to do in that editor. You just load them all in and then just call them back up by name.
Yeah, you could, I have a preset on mine that is for, okay, I'm dealing with some high power stuff here. And it's got, a significant amount of attenuation on it. And that way you can kind of safely interface with those systems and know that you're not going to cause any issues on the device. And then when you want to jump back to just monitoring the show and looking at, your mic and IEM systems, you can just jump over to another preset in like a couple clicks. It's pretty easy.
So the preset screen you were showing us, that's in the computer software, not in the actual Explorer, when you're setting your presets and saving them.
Yeah, that's just a way to like pretty rapidly run through the presets you want to get onto the device and just dump them from the computer to the unit. You can hand enter those presets, and it's really not that difficult. But if you wanted to have 20 presets, better to just get the utility. You just load those all in. What we've heard and what we get back from customers that are using these is they get them out of the box, they open them up, they fire it up, they see the spectrum that's in their particular venue or their show or whatever it is, and it's like, now what? What do we do with this info? And one of the things that folks are generally not very aware of is that when you have just the whip antenna, you know, a little UHF whip that ships with the unit, you know, similar to any other, you know, whip antenna you'd see on wireless mics, you're not seeing the same thing that the rest of your mic receivers are seeing, at least in this photo. So really the best thing you want to do is to connect the unit directly to an output on your distro. Yes, it doesn't look at both A and B at the same time, but in terms of understanding what your remote antennas, in this case is a diversity fin in the background, what is that picking up? What is that sending downstream to the rest of the receivers? And that information is critically important because you can walk around with the spectrum analyzer with an antenna on it and see all sorts of things, but until you see what the antenna is picking up and sending through the rest of the system, it's not really apples and oranges, but I mean, they're just not the same. And so really for monitoring, you know, managing shows, you know, as they're happening or commissioning systems, this is the best way to go. And you can certainly just put a splitter, you know, a little 2x1 splitter on an output if you don't have any outputs available, and, you know, connect in your RF Explorer or your spectrum analyzer, and there's just an enormous amount of knowledge to be gained by doing that. So the device itself, you know, on board has these different features, these different functions. Where it gets really interesting is when you interface it with a computer. We've developed for the Mac for about 5 or 6 years now, and so our software package for this is Mac based, and I'll just switch over and see where we're at here. Yep. Pete, do you have this screen? Just
We
checking.
do. Yeah, we got it. We got it.
Just checking. So I'm up here in the People's Republic of Vermont, where there's not a lot of RF to look at, unfortunately, and I don't have really any big systems set up. We'll take a look at some other you know, major metros a little bit later, but just to give you an idea of the interface and how it works, this is a really straightforward, really easy to use piece of software that is really geared towards pro audio instead of test and measurement. So test and measurement software, you'd see a million options of things to click on and do, whereas this, you launch it, you connect your device, install the driver, you launch it, and you're up and running. Just start scanning. It defaults to 470 to 608, but you can easily jump around these ranges as you need, or, you know, save other ranges that you like to use and just jump around from there. This is a version that is going to be released probably next week, still in testing, but it's got a couple new features in it. But here we have that same Y signal strength and frequency span that you see on the device itself, but the software basically takes over the control of the unit. So the unit goes dark, the device goes dark, and then you're in basically software control. So from a workflow standpoint, let's say we've got our unit connected to a spare output on our distro, like we saw on that last slide. We're looking at the RF, you know, scans that are coming through. You know, what are some things that we can do here to understand the operating environment a little better? And there'll be a little bit more to look at when we look at some, you know, noisier environments than out here in the sticks. But there's some different things we can do, like looking at a max hold, you know, looking at an average scan, looking at, you know, waterfall scan, different things that are in here, just to give you a different view. And some other options like this compare feature, which is just a really straightforward way of doing like an A/B. And the thinking on this was antenna placement. So it's one of the most misunderstood and frankly one of the more difficult things to figure out, where we have our remote antennas set up at our location because, you know, at our say like a mixed position, because hey, that's where the rest of the stuff is, right? So let's put the antennas here. But it's unbelievable the changes that you can see when you move those antennas around and you try different locations, you try different angles, etc. And so this compare feature is a really convenient way of looking at a snapshot from one position and then comparing what the other look is at another position. So in terms of commissioning a new system or you know, testing out, you know, antenna locations prior to going live on a show, that's a handy thing to do. And then we have our marker here, this white line in the middle. This is typical for most spectrum tools, where we're able to see the signal level at a given point. And you know, one thing that bears mentioning is resolution bandwidth, which basically refers to the step size, each iterative step of the scan. You know, how large is that? How small is that? And on the RF Explorer series, it's sort of set automatically. So if you set a really wide span, say you're scanning from, you know, VHF to, you know, I don't know, 2 gig or something like that, on the handheld unit itself, not connected to the computer, it'll set a broader, you know, more coarse step setting than maybe we would like. And the reason for that is the speed of the scan and how fast it can produce the scan data on the device itself. When you're connected to the software, like here on Wave Tower from Mac, we can override all that and put all the scans into a 25 kilohertz step size, so that we're always seeing an incremental step that's going to be applicable for these wireless audio systems that we're all working with, that are all set up that way. So that's an important point, and really a reason to kind of dial in the device when you're using it in the handheld fashion to the range that you're interested in. You don't want to look at a really wide range of stuff you don't care about, because it just slows everything down and you're looking at data that sort of doesn't impact what you're trying to do. So just 1 or 2 more minutes on this. I don't want to make a career out of a software tutorial here, but basically there's a deeper levels here that are emerging on this, primarily frequency monitoring. So you can import or manually add in frequencies for your system and then monitor those as the show is sort of ongoing. And you can do this by importing from, say, like a wireless workbench inventory file, or you can manually put these in. And what that'll do is that'll drop a marker at the position, and it'll give you just kind of a red, yellow, green readout of what you know, what the signal level is against a threshold that you set. So for doing a live show or commissioning an installed system before you hand it off, it's a really good way to test out and understand, you know, where are we at? Do we need to move antennas? Do we have enough signal in the area where we need it? And the coordination function on this, which is early but growing, we've got a basic frequency coordination package for a small number of devices that will be growing pretty soon. So you can run a basic coordination out of here if you're just trying to do a quick and dirty setup of a system. And then one of the most important workflows in here is the export function and getting to a CSV, because really the spectrum analyzer is a tool that will, like this, allow you to visualize, monitor, you know, manage, but also capture data for you that can then be used elsewhere. So, you know, this software won't interface directly with your short ULXD or Axient system, but it'll generate a scan file that you can easily import that will allow you to continue the coordination workflow. And the same goes for IAS, where they accept kind of a similar 2-column basic CSV file. So if we took our scan and then we went into Workbench, and you go to scan files, you can easily just load in that exported scan data from there, and then work with that for your coordination, instead of being limited to the range of the receivers or scanning directly off the receivers themselves.
Which we find is kind of important, that you can look at out of band information, right? So when you use a receiver as your input device, it's kind of looking through blinders. It can only see the range it can tune to, and so it's not going to show you T-Mobile sitting up just above you, or it's not going to show you your security radios just on the bottom end of you, or maybe some LED lighting or video walls or some other stuff like that. So you want to take those into consideration by using an external scanner instead of just a receiver. You can, in most cases, get better data to give to your coordination program, so it can consider those things when it's calculating the channels that you're going to be using.
Right. And that out of band spectrum data is becoming more important, where different noise, different interference, different stuff that is showing up inside your scan, inside your operating range. The source of that is not within your view if you're looking within a limited range. It's looking at a painting through a drinking straw kind of situation. So having control over the broad sort of spectrum, separate from the specific wireless system you're working with, is a real advantage, because you can know what's going on above you and below you, and it can influence a number of decisions for equipment choices that we can talk about, such as bandpass filtering. So let me see. That's the sort of tethered, device to your local machine application that we have and that we see used very widely. One of the most common things, I mean, if you look at the RF venue, I see these Instagram hashtags and stuff of guys that are doing shows that are tagging RF venue, and they've got their audio monitoring, they've got their various sort of software systems that are up at the mix position. Having a secondary monitor that just has the RF up, that can give you an at-a-glance view of what's happening, is a really useful way of using this particular tool with the Wave Tower software. So in terms of like, well, how would this be set up in my rig? That's a really common application. So I'm going to jump in now.
A couple of questions before we go on. Is the RF Explorer Pro compatible with the Seed RF Explorer for Windows software, as Wave Tower for Mac is only Mac?
Yes. Yeah, we're looking at ways to port what we have developed on the Mac over to Windows. It's getting easier and easier now. Forever, it was a whole other development exercise, and we'd be managing multiple software applications, and it gets crazy complicated from a software development standpoint. But yes, there is a free RF Explorer application. There's various other ones. If you go to the RF Explorer website, they have a list of the other ones that are there for PC. So if you want to get up and running on Windows 10 or whatever it is now, by all means, you can do that with this unit.
And what's the range of the scan speed? With 5 per second on the last video, what's the range you can set it to?
I believe that is defaulted, Pete, to the the span. So if you set a really narrow span, say you're just looking at,
Faster. Okay.
yeah, if you're looking at like 520 to 560, it's super fast. If you're looking
Okay.
at
Okay.
15 to 2700, it's slower.
So there's no actual way to set that speed. You just set your scan narrower if you want to get a faster. If you're looking at one frequency with maybe a 1 megahertz window, it's very fast.
Yeah, and that's why when you're using the handheld unit, you know, that'll vary automatically in the device to try to give you as quick a span with the best possible results. But on the software side, when you have it interfaced on the computer, where we can basically override that and say, no, we need 25 kilohertz steps no matter what, that'll take a larger, that larger span will take a longer time than a short.
Right.
Which is why, and a lot of people are like, well, I want to see everything. I want to see, you know, I want to see below FM up to, you know, above Wi-Fi. And it's like, great, then you're gonna have to wait.
Exactly. So that goes into the next question. How many frequencies can you monitor realistically simultaneously?
Um,
And it depends on the span, I would suppose. So if you're looking at frequencies, one TV channel.
Yeah. It depends on the span for sure, which is why, you know, we typically recommend that people pick, you know, at most, what, Don, 600-700 megahertz span before it starts to kind of slow down a little bit, which should cover you from at least portions of VHF up into, you know, 900. And then you can drill in from there, right?
Yeah. Your
It's
input.
it's probably easier to pick presets if you need to use a bunch of ones than to wait for it all to scan, but
Yep.
you can do it either way.
Yep.
On your import frequencies function, was that for importing individual frequencies or a scan?
That's for importing inventory. So like,
Okay.
specifically if you have a, let's say you have a workbench file, right? That's got your system.
Right.
And you want to dump that into Wave Tower, either the Mac app or the cloud app that we'll look at in a second.
Right.
It saves you the effort from keying it all in, right? It just dumps it all in.
Can that be done from an IAS list as well?
You know, I don't think the IAS equipment list is compatible. It's something we need to.
It's different format, definitely.
Yeah, it's definitely a different format. And I don't believe that we have that import function native.
Okay. Is there any sort of running log with your scan? I wouldn't imagine there would be. He asked, maybe I missed this, but is there a running log that is recorded and can it be exported? I don't know what there would be a log of, but
Not with the handheld one, but you'll see with the one that's up right now, you will be able to with the cloud base.
oh, okay. And then can you use RF Explorer with an iPad?
We've been playing with the new mirroring function on iPads.
Okay, but not directly.
Have on your laptop, but there isn't an iOS compatible version yet.
Right.
There's some hoops to jump through. Apple is making it harder and harder to do literally anything anymore. But
did you cover the difference between Vantage and Wave Tower?
So
the difference in terms of the cost.
So Wave Tower is sort of the initial version of you know, this Wave Tower platform. I mean, anyone
it's not a web-based system through your servers or anything like your Wave Tower.
Well, no, actually. So Vantage for the Mac has become Wave Tower for Mac.
Okay.
So instead of having a separate desktop brand and a cloud-based brand, it's one thing. And one of the reasons for doing that is we are able to now connect the desktop app to the cloud side. So
Okay.
your Wave Tower account includes the Mac application as well as the cloud application. It's one thing, and now they're able to talk to one another. So if you
But
want,
it's still a subscription,
yep, it's a
even if
subscription product.
even if you have no cloud needs.
Right, right.
Now, does that mean you still have to be connected to the internet to use it?
No, there's an authorization step where you basically sign up for Wave Tower, and you can go to the RFNU website and sandbox this thing. There's a free trial if you'd like to play around with it. But the way that it's sort of authenticated is through the internet. It's not every time you use it, but basically when you first set it up, you do need to have an internet connection. But after that, if you just want to use it locally on the road or whatever, there's no issues there.
Okay, that catches us up. Oh, wait, is
Is
that a yearly subscription sort of thing, or?
It's a monthly or annual subscription. The annual subscription is $99. The
Right.
monthly subscription is $12, and you can kind of cancel at any time. There's
Right.
plenty of folks that really need this, but maybe only need it for a couple of shows a year, which is totally fine. You can kind of sign up and come out and come back on, whatever you need. But if you work in a consistent sort of, group of venues, if
Right.
you have internet access and you're using the desktop Wave Tower from Mac app, you can
Right.
input that location and you can push that scan data to your cloud account so that you can retrieve it later or work with it before or after you're on site.
Does the older version software Vantage still work with Wave Tower Pro, or is that a different service? Only with Explorer Pro?
It still works. Yeah, it still works with the RF Explorer Pro Audio. We've just discontinued development for that particular version. If there's anyone that has Vantage, they have a free annual subscription to the service. So going in and
I
setting up.
mean, if you've already bought Vantage, you don't have to have. Is it just for the first year or forever?
It's just for the first year. Yeah, it's not
Right.
perpetual, unfortunately.
Right.
It's gotten too big, Pete.
Well, I totally understand software production, software writing costs, and a lot of companies are just, they charge for an upgrade, but it never is enough.
Right.
And what I always say is I want features in it, and I ask for the features, but somehow it has to be paid for. And if you have a subscription, you might be more responsive to features.
100%. And guess what? When you put, 5,000-10,000 people in a piece of software, a lot of support involved. And there's, you want to make it better all the time because all your web apps are getting better all the time, right?
Right.
And so it's, it's just one of those things where it's like, it's got to evolve.
Sure.
And that's just the point that we're at. We don't have like rooms full of people coding this thing.
I totally understand.
Yeah.
Although we're getting comments from people, $100 a year just to pull data for my $300 RF venue after we already paid for Vantage.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you've already paid for Vantage, you can continue to use Vantage.
For a year.
Right.
For a year.
You can continue to use it locally the way you've always been using it. So
Okay.
that doesn't, that doesn't go away. You just won't get the increased features and the feature set that's been added to the new program. But you're free to use Vantage.
Let's spend a little time on what the actual features you add when you go to Wave Tower.
Sure.
Unless you already talked about that.
Well, it's some of the things that I mentioned already.
Right. Okay.
One of the primary differences is the entire cloud side of the application. Take a look at.
And if they have Vantage, where do they look up their purchase, their contract, their license, if they want to apply for
it? To get in touch with us directly.
If they have Vantage, but they can't figure out how to find in the software what their license is to tell you.
Yeah, best thing would be to get in touch with us directly. We can look that up on a case.
It's not on their software, it's on their account.
Yeah, basically.
Okay,
So
okay,
the,
that's
the
fine.
licensing software has moved from one place to another, and we ported everybody over so that they can access the new software. And yeah, I mean, it's
Okay.
it's best kind of handled, individually.
Got it. Cool. Continue.
Cloud-based side of this is pretty interesting and kind of gets to Kelly's original point about, remote and thinking about remote and how do we use remote going forward. This is the RF Explorer Pro Audio unit that is a LAN-based device. So this is going to scan the same 15 to 2700 of the handheld unit, but it's basically a box that is going to continuously ship scan data to the cloud, to your account. So you can do a number of different things with this, like if it's an integrated system, you can include this with the install and provide, remote support or troubleshooting or services, whatever. And you can also send this in advance to a site where you're going to be working, have it connected to the local network, and it will send that scan data back to your account. So you can pull down actual data from the spectrum in that environment and coordinate your system before you even leave your shop, which saves a ton of time and gives you a much better understanding of what to send in the first place, how to configure filters, antennas, etc. So the way that this works is it sends the data on an outbound basis over port 80, the HTTP port. It's super lightweight in terms of bandwidth on the network, and there's no port forwarding or other IT integration that's required on most networks. So it's pretty plug and play for anyone that can find a LAN port and a power supply. This thing can get you up and running. And similarly to what we were looking at before, where you connect your unit directly to your distro, this will give you the best results in terms of seeing what the rest of your receivers are seeing. So we'll take a look at the cloud software for a second here. So the primary view, we've got a really cool UI or user interface design and update that's coming to this really soon. I just got a first look at it yesterday. That's just a really nice kind of cleaner look than what we have here. But basically, this is a sort of public account we have with a bunch of data sources on it, a bunch of these remote units. And you can see on the map here, I know it's a little laggy over the GoToMeeting connection, but basically the green sources are live and sending data. The red sources are inactive, maybe the network's not connecting or the unit's on the shelf, not being used. And then the blue ones are the ones that have been set to public view. So if you're a venue and you want other Wave Tower users to be able to access what's going on in your particular location, you can set that device to public and it can be accessed by anyone on the network. It defaults to private, so you have to kind of opt into that, but for certain users, that's exactly what they want, which is just an easy way for people to access the local conditions and optimize for the best outcome. But below here, there's sort of a table that shows a bunch of different locations, addresses, etc., where you can go in and you can edit different aspects of these in terms of how their settings are, what their frequency ranges are set to, these various things like that. And then in each individual location, what you see is similar to what we were just looking at, right? So you've got your signal strength and your frequency span on the Y and X axis respectively. But there's things that you can do on the cloud side that you can't do on just an ad hoc basis when you're tethered locally to a computer on site with a spectrum analyzer. Like, look at the previous 24 hours in one click and understand what's the sort of kitchen sink scenario, or look at an average hold to really get a sense of like what are the most consistent sources like DTV stations or other sources of potential interference or noise that are out there. So having the remote aspect to RF can really enable a lot of different capabilities. And I was chatting with Kelly yesterday a little bit, just getting sort of admin stuff set up through this webinar. And, you know, we got to talking about like, well, all right, if, you know, in the near term, we're not going to be able to go to all these places, and they're going to be slowly opening up, and there's going to be more services, you know, because there's always problems to solve, right? How do we do that without being on site, and how do we be in more places than one and offer services that you know, can really add value for the venue, for the end user, for the person you're working with. And the ability to remotely monitor and manage this stuff, I think, is a really powerful way to do that. So this is at a church in it's out in Menlo Park, California, and you can see here, you know, they've got a bunch of TV stations that are around in the lower 500s. They've got a bunch of white space in 530 to 550. And what these guys have done is they've set up their system with markers so they know what's where, right? And I can't, Don, I don't know if you have anything to add to this, but
I'm used to looking at this all the time. So what you're seeing, this is where they preset all their mics and ears. They are red lines right now because they're off, right? If this was active, you would see those in green.
Right.
Yeah, well, there's the list. Yeah, so it's unfortunate to do this while we're all locked down, because it's very hard to demonstrate these things because a lot of stuff's not on. But during a show, these would all be green. They wouldn't go from the bottom to the top. They would go up as high as they are, and you would see them. But now with everything switched off, you know, these may not have been turned on for a while. So, but this was their last assignments. So when they come in and flip on the next Sunday, they open and all this stuff will come up, and you were to come back to this, you would see green, and you would be able to follow a show from wherever you're sitting. You can sit in your bunny slippers in your lazy boy chair and watch this on your phone or your iPad. So this is just a web address. So you don't need any software. This is just www Wave Tower my account, and you pull up whatever you can see.
So what's the scan time on this full spectrum?
So this looks like it's set to the default speed. So this is 470 to 608. Again, you can change that.
And how long did it take to scan that whole thing to watch your entire show?
There's you know, certainly variables involved, network latency, et cetera, but the primary driver, again, is that span. So the width of the span sets the time for the scan to come through and be processed on the servers and the cloud side. And for 470 to 608, you know, I would say that it's probably in the realm of, you know, 8 to 12 seconds. So this is not going to replace your on-site real-time spectrum analyzer.
Right.
What this is really designed to do is to capture the spectrum activity over time that your real-time analyzer is not as well set up to do.
Yeah,
so
Derek brings up a question about this. He has a wave tower that was set from VHF through 2.4, so visiting RF engineers can view the spectrum before they got there. But when they get there, they want to be able to log onto the site and select reduce bandwidth to get more detailed scans.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, if they're given the log on to the site for their wave tower, they can do that, right?
If they're given the login to their account, they can do that. It depends. So
the login to the account of the person that has that wave tower, yes.
Right. Okay. So Yes. So if you go,
You just sweep this and is that live or is that, I don't know where you are. I mean, you show, just focus in, just pick 10 megahertz out of that and show us.
But I'm sure you can do it. That's not the point. The point is he's asking, can people use, I guess he's saying use his logon to log on. He just says, will RF techs will be able to log on to the site and select reduced bandwidth to get more detailed scans? And the answer is yes, of course.
Right. So the owner of the account can give permission to whoever they want. If you have permission, then you can get in here and change stuff.
Right.
Otherwise, you can just see it, or they can lock you out and you can't see it at all.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So a good idea for this is, like with a church, I don't know this church off the top of my head, but if they have, traveling musicians that come in, those guys could see the Sunday ahead of what happened last Sunday, or,
so as a new frequency pops up, a new red line will pop up and be there when they come to look at again.
Yeah. In fact, Chris, why don't you grab that, show them, I don't know what this is, this active right now. Show them what it was last Tuesday,
I think this might be a little laggy for a webinar, but we can give it a shot. Basically, like, we're holding about 2 months of data here. So as the unit is scanning, we're storing these scans in a database that's constantly updating. So if you wanted to go back and look at like a previous, say Sunday, last Sunday at, I don't know, 10 a.m. We'll see if this loads or not. We'll show you, okay, this is May 17th at 7 o'clock in the morning. Pretty similar. Probably didn't have a service.
Sorry, there's another question that keeps popping up. You're still selling Vantage, right?
No.
You're not even, you can't even buy it anymore.
No, it's discontinued. It's been evolved into a Wave Tower for Mac. It's part of the Wave Tower.
Okay.
Yep. If you have a Vantage account from last year or prior, it'll still authenticate. It'll still work, but we're not developing.
So for all you RF engineers who have a Vantage account and are not using it, it's worth gold now.
I don't know about gold, but all right.
Got it.
So yeah, I mean, just because you've got the ability to, look at different regions and have access to these racks wherever they are, there's some interesting use case applications. Like, we've got a large multi-campus church customer that has locations all over Oklahoma City and all over the rest of the country. And, one use case that they have is they've got kind of a core group of technical folks that really understand RF, really understand the systems that have been designed and put into these different campuses. And from a centralized location, they can remotely monitor and manage every single facility that they have. So if you think about like broadcast studios, multi-venue places like, theme parks, corporate campuses, we've done a ton of, where they've got lots of different training rooms, and, not necessarily high channel count per room. They're not doing 100 mics in an auditorium for a lecture hall, but they've got 100 auditoriums. How do you stay on top of all that? And part of it, and I was going to mention this before when we were looking at this church and this list of frequencies you guys have loaded, is like, half of our integrators are like, yeah, we put this system in, we did a coordination, and it was working great. And, 3 months later, 6 months later, 12 months later, they call up and they're like, the mic's not working. It's like, well, okay, what did we even put in there again? And like, even just basic stuff, like having a nice clean record of like what was put in, what the spectrum looked like at the time, and what it looks like now that they're having an issue and we want to go in and solve. You can see that the spectrum has changed. There's a bunch of noise, interference, et cetera, and we got to sort of retool and optimize this thing. or in a lot of cases, B, they moved all the frequencies around. And they're not working off of the coordination that they were sort of given in the first place. So
What are those two blue lines? IEM 7 and 5. Right there.
IEM 7 and 5 are.
I mean, why are they blue as opposed to red?
They're meeting the minimum threshold that's set. So if you look up at, let's see, IEM 5 is what it's called. IEM 5, that's this guy right here. 576.35. It's a Sennheiser system.
So it basically means it's on.
It basically means it's meeting. Yeah, it's on. It's meeting this minus 70 threshold that's been set here. That's at minus 56. Yeah, so maybe they're monkeying around in there. Who knows?
Kenneth Goodwin asked, did RF Venue purchase the RF Explorer from the folks who made the silver version, Touchstone and Clear Waves?
So RF Explorer is a separate company, an amazing group of people. They're based over in Spain. The Clear Waves and Touchstone is a different company altogether. It's another software vendor that interfaces with the RF Explorer stuff. We didn't purchase any of those companies. We have
So the Explorer is not an RF Venue product. You're just making software and Wave Tower to interface with it. But the Pro is only sold by RF Venue.
That's right.
Right, and so that's a little different unit that they manufacture for us. It has some features that the other ones don't have. But it is made by the RF Explorer company for us for the needs that we had.
The scan archive is all cloud-based, right? None of it is kept in your own computer.
Correct.
So when you have a Wave Tower an account, that account will save your whatever you have it plugged in for X number of years at the location.
Yeah, about 60 days.
Oh, maximum 60 days?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you can't go back and look at what they did last year.
No.
It's a lot of data, Pete.
Yeah, it definitely is. Hey, it's only hard disk drives, you know?
It's only storage bills. No,
Exactly.
the number of scans, and this is actually a good point to touch on. I'm glad you asked that. It's like when you think about the RF spectrum and you think about at least for pro audio, like I know pro audio is in lots of different bands now. I don't want to oversimplify it, but we just stick 470 to 608 for a second, just to be easy.
Right.
If this scans every 8 to 12 seconds, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, that's an enormous amount of data. The question becomes, what are you going to do with a scan that's a year old or a year and a half old, right? Because
it doesn't help you.
It doesn't really help. But
that said, we do have enterprise versions. If you want that and you're willing to pay for all that storage, we can make that happen.
Yeah.
I don't see any value in it, but not the way I'm thinking. But
I collect scans as well on my website, and I divide them 6 months, 6 months to a year, and over a year. Basically, everything over a year I count as useless.
Legacy.
Pretty much. Who knows?
Unless you're looking at a town in some strange country somewhere that maybe only has one TV station at all anyway, then maybe it's useful. But obviously, certainly in the United States, the last 6 months is all you care about.
Well, like to this point, Pete. So I just jumped over, and I apologize. I'm not like navigating the map on every single one of these because I think it's almost like we'll give you vertigo with the lag. But basically, I loaded a bunch of different sources that are in here. Here's one from our friends down at Dale Pro Audio, down in New York, and then here's another one that's over in Citi Field where the Mets play. And okay, here's obviously a ton of TV. Some noise, some pretty high power, signals that are in here that we'd want to be aware of. But looking at data from 6 months ago or a year ago, well, how do we determine what are the most, what frequencies do we care about? Like what's coming and going? Like I know that in all likelihood, these TV stations aren't going, but what's sort of coming and going? And so we have this active frequencies function that basically strips out the
TV stations.
static stuff, and it shows you the stuff that's
Nice.
so it's not captured. And a lot of this is, low or 400s and, public
Right.
safety. It's kind of coming and, but like, it gives you an idea of like between knowing that 520 to 560 at Citi Field is like wide open. And then looking at the spectrum trace live, there's, okay, maybe one frequency that's in here. Maybe this just can't.
Yep.
But like this,
David Lynn was saying, what's the point of this? It's only good for installs. Well, if you're an active frequency coordinator and you're doing jobs all over the United States, it sure would be nice for you to get a scan in the city you're going to be in 2 months. And you can FedEx this to somebody, say, plug it into the network, and you can just let it sit there and you'll pick it up when you go there next. And you can look at the scans in the venue you're going to be in a couple of months.
get to work on your hotel room. Yeah.
Well, and
Or
for
something.
for a lot of installers, it's like, hey, they go out and do a site scan, Wednesday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon from 3 to 4. That's what they've got. But what might be there Saturday night or Sunday morning or pick any other day you want might be considerably different or might not change at all. But at least this way, you can go back day to day, hour to hour for a while and see what happens. So it's also great if you're that installer, and you commissioned a new system and you put it in a church, and Monday morning you get a call and you got the pastor on the phone that says, hey, it didn't work. You can go back and see what changed Sunday morning at 10 o'clock. You can see that. If you weren't there, I mean, with a conventional scanner, if you weren't there and it wasn't on, that's gone. You'll never find that information. So this gives you a fighting chance, moving forward, to look backwards.
If somebody owned a dozen hardware devices to send out in the field, can you separate your archive by each one?
Yes.
So you don't have to look at the whole thing all in one place?
Right.
Archive one. So if like here's one church account on this
Okay.
access where they've got all these different sources, and there's other ones all over the country. They have a single account,
And each one you can look at that one. Yeah. Okay.
you can go into each one, however you have them. They have a naming convention they use, but like whatever you can easily jump into each individual one on a single account. And the way that the system is configured is it's only billed per user. So you could, blanket a region with these things and have a single user and still pay $12 a month.
Right. But obviously you're sending this box out to the field to probably not a very smart RF, if at all, person.
Yep.
And you need to just be a little careful about telling them, please put this on your stage left, plug it into a network that's in the theater at least, so you can monitor, or put it up on your roof, whatever, if you want inside or outside, So
Right.
Ike Zimba was saying, how do I know how it's getting plugged in on site? Well,
yeah, the church secretary can plug this in. I mean, it's that simple. You just put power
you gotta
plug it
tell
into the
them
network
where
and
to
walk
put
away
it.
from it. Yeah.
Got to describe where to put it, because they could put it in the coat closet behind the secretary, and then it doesn't.
Yeah. So you would like to include that.
Exactly.
The basic instruction we usually try to tell people is that, like, let's assume that we have an actual functioning, venue with like some kind of front of house position. Or so, we've got the bare bones.
The best, at least somebody who's seen a wireless mic before, maybe.
But even if not, Pete, you could say, to the church secretary, hey, go over to the mixer, plug this thing in and put it on top of the mixer, and like you're done.
Yep, sure.
You're not going to go in the back of the distro and like take outputs apart and all that, but like it's pretty easy. Where you run into more integration is on like really locked down, networks where a MAC address has to get approved or something like that. But even that case, you forward IT like, hey, you know, here's a quick snapshot of what this thing is, like, you know, turn it on, and, you know, there's not a lot of heavy lifting. That was a
So
very, very purposeful thing on our part,
you
because
bring up network issues. So some networks you're saying have firewalls that need a specific MAC address defined to make something work. Is what you're saying, right?
yeah, if the network is, you know, in terms of
Lockdown.
yeah, if the network needs to approve MAC addresses, and that goes for your smoke alarm as much as it goes for, you know, your whatever AV device, you just need to provide the MAC address, a quick note to any
But-
IT person would look at this and go, oh, okay, it's coming out over 80, nothing coming in, you know, sure, like here's the MAC address, turn it on.
Yeah, I've never actually run into that ever. And as long as it's going to a public address on the outside, which is basically your server,
Right.
it
So
should connect without any problem.
There's another way around this that we use all the time, and that's just to use a mobile hotspot.
Right.
So if you put a mobile hotspot in the
Yeah,
box
okay.
already plugged
Yeah,
in, you just take it out, give it power. You
Just
know,
put a battery in there, tell the secretary not even to open the
Yeah.
box. Put the box
because
on the house.
sometimes, you know, sometimes if you're doing a corporate thing where they've got a lot of lockdown stuff, right? It's not hard to do. The problem is you got to wait 2.5 hours for the IT guy to come back from lunch and martinis before he can, you know, flip a switch and turn you on.
Yeah.
With
Yeah.
a mobile hotspot, you just plug it in and you're done. So, you know, that's the quick and easy, you know, yeah, it's $2 a month more. But
Does the device, do you have to be careful about overloading the input to it? In other words, what if you set it down in the house next to an ear transmitter that was on all the time? Does this front end need a typical receiver carefulness of putting it away from other transmitters? Probably.
It's pretty much the same guidelines that we were talking about earlier with the handheld unit, right? Like you don't want to overload the front end, so
Right,
it doesn't
right,
connect directly to a
yeah,
transmitter.
I'd be more worried about, you know, the 2-watt walkie-talkies being 6 inches away
yeah.
from it.
Oh yeah.
Being keyed on. You know, that probably wouldn't be a good day. You know, an IEM transmitter, well, it depends how powerful it is and everything else. I mean, you know,
Now, if you're just in the venue and want to put an antenna at front of house and you want to be backstage, just one Cat5 run out there and you're done. You don't have to be on a network, right? Or it has to be on your local computer network.
yeah, you can use if there's a system there. That something you could do that. You know, if you as an integrator take this out and you know you put a new system in for somebody and you just want to watch it for the first week or two, you know, then you're certainly capable of doing that, and you're going to get different information if you're looking at your directional antennas than if you're just looking at a whip from someplace. So it, you know, depends what you're trying to look at.
Right. So just getting back to the topic of like workflow, you know, we talked about when you're on the desktop and you're tethered to a spectrum analyzer, you know, producing a CSV and, you know, having that built into your Workbench or IAS workflow or whatever, you can export this data in the same way. So we can take the current scan, max hold, or the average scan, and we can dump that to a CSV that you can load into Workbench the same way that we were looking at earlier. So in terms of like remotely accessing scan data, it's really convenient to coordinate systems before they're deployed or to understand things like, wow, you know, we've got this great white space in, you know, sticking with this church, 530 to 550 or whatever it is. Maybe a bandpass filter from 560 up or whatever in this range would, you know, improve things even more, or, you know, localized antennas and that kind of thing. You can kind of dial in and focus in the performance of the system from this snapshot and do it remotely.
How do you include the VHF band in this? Is it a separate screen?
It'd just be a matter of resetting the span. So if
Okay.
you go back to you know, the table and you find your device, log me in stuff. Hold on. Go to webinar. So we could go in and change that span. It happens at the device level, Pete.
Right.
So, I mean, not a bad example, actually, Angels baseball. Let's see.
No, I understand. I understand.
That's where that's set, is at the device level. You know, because it has to get pulled by the unit to check, is this my frequency range? Yes. Okay. Oh,
Right.
no, it's my new frequency range. You know, it's not as, you don't really want to flip channels on this thing like your TV, right?
And as in that frequency range of basically 50 or 70 megahertz up to 400 up to 600, you use the same antenna?
Well, you'd be better off using a more specialized antenna for a range. The antenna that comes with it, pardon me, is you know, for UHF wireless mics to be good for that. And if you want to monitor VHF or you want to monitor something else, having a more suitable antenna, better result. You know, nobody's got an antenna that goes from DC to light, so you know you're better off. You'll still get something. You know, an antenna that's more appropriate will give you better information. So if you're only interested in monitoring VHF range, then you know hooking this up to a VHF antenna would be a good thing. If you're bouncing all over the place and just trying to look at everything, you know, it just depends how detailed a look you need. I mean, do you want to know this down to fractional things? Then yeah, we should do it better. Or if you're just looking for just kind of go no go kind of information, you would do it differently. Oh, let me just add one thing. The scan history is going to be what the unit was set at on the day that you go back to scan to, right? So if we're set for, you know, 470 to 608 today, we can't go back 2 weeks and see what was happening in VHF range. We weren't set to it. So we could set it to VHF now, and tomorrow I could come back and see what was here in VHF. You know, so it just it is recording to the cloud what you have it set to.
Right. So to the point of building this feature in, and I'm not gonna stick with this for too long, but basically we've had this function coming together in the distro side. So your distro 9 HDR is, you know, capable of having this same functionality as the standalone unit we were looking at built right in. So you would just stick a Cat 5 cable into your distro and you'd be able to remote into any of your installs. So to the question earlier about like, well, how does this work for integration, or if it's just for live, you know, forward deployment, that kind of thing. Definitely not. This is something that can live in the system and adapt and, you know, help you change to conditions as they come along.
So as an integrator, for example, if you use this distro and you've got a corporate client somewhere, you know, you could offer them a monitoring service, right? You can actually you put the card in this. Anytime they have a problem, they could call you, or actually there's other ways that it can notify you that there's a problem. But and then, you know, if that system is all set up on a network, instead of driving 300 miles to get to where they are, you actually could, you know, if this whole thing's on a Dante network or something, you could change the channel frequencies. You could do whatever you need to do without actually physically having to be there. So that's a big advantage.
We've got a guy local to us in Boston that's got a huge medical device client out in the Midwest, and they've got a huge campus, and they put on big events, you know, sales trainings and all sorts of stuff, and it's like real high channel count stuff, but they've got it spread out over a really large area, and so he's able to provide for them ongoing, service support for, whatever a month, year, alongside the, the integration service, where it's like, yeah, here's all these tools, here's all this equipment that I specified and designed and installed and commissioned. And by the way, I'm along for the ride to help you make it work. And he's going to get on a plane to Minnesota or whatever it is to go handle a lot of these things, because a lot of it is coordination between rooms and understanding which transmitters are moving where. And so I think if this capability is built into more systems at the distro level, where maybe you don't have to explain to the client that you need a standalone remote land-based spectrum analyzer, and it's actually going to match the requirements for the system purely from distributing the antenna signals. I think that the concept kind of lines up pretty well on the integration side.
So this basically is putting your wave tower inside your receiver DA box.
Right.
So it's watching
Exactly.
the same thing your normal antennas are watching.
Yes.
Yep.
Do you still have a demo channel that people can download the Wave software and try out Wave Tower like you had before?
Yeah, if you go to rfvenue.com and go to the menu drop down, there's a Wave Tower Spectrum software page that has a bunch of info, and then a free 14-day trial to sandbox and play around in, which again includes both the cloud and the desktop app.
And that is how many different locations do you have on there?
So the sources that you'll see on there are the ones that are set to public. So all the blue flags that we were looking at.
So those could be somebody else's actual private equipment, but they've elected to make it public.
Not could
Right.
be, is, they are, yeah.
Oh, okay. But you still need a paid subscription for your software to view those public.
No, you
Wave
can
towers,
sign
right?
up for a free Wave Tower account to view them. So imagine that we could put one of these in every major venue.
Right.
And you could, and they decided to set it to public, right? If you're the Hollywood Bowl and you stuck one of these in there and you made it public, anybody that was coming could see what they're up against.
But they don't they need a subscription to the Wave Tower software to do that?
So the owner of the actual tower device would do that.
Right.
And then they could allow everybody to see it, or they could charge you to see it. You want to see what's coming here? Then you pay us.
So then they use the same software, but they have to get a special login from the people.
No,
Yeah.
if you make it public, you won't be able to control it. You won't be able to change anything.
Right.
You'll just be able to view it. But so if you have a tower and it's public, then anybody that has a Wave Tower account, which is free, can view public towers.
So that Wave Tower account is the same one that you get as a demo, right?
It's a 14-day trial, Pete. So there's free access for 14 days, and after that, you need to sign up for an account to access.
That's what I was asking. So you need a paid subscription to view the public Wave Tower devices.
Yeah. So let's say that you want,
even if you don't own it.
if you wanted to look at the Hollywood Bowl and
Got
they have a tower set up, and you didn't have a paid Wave Tower account, and you were outside of a trial or something, you could sign up for $12, access all that data, and you can export the CSVs from that too. There's certainly some things you can do in there.
And if I tune into my client's site, can I demod one of the channels and listen to it?
No.
No.
Nope. It's really a spectrum. It's a spectrum analyzer, really, and there's no demod capability. And demodding digital systems and everything now is a lot different than it used to be.
Ivan says, I found only one public Wave Tower in LA with a free, which is public. Is that right? Or is he doing something wrong?
That's what day you look.
I don't know why you would need more than one, but
I don't know. I'd have to go look.
yeah. And then while you're looking, on the distro 9, can you select which antenna you're connected to, A or B?
It's defaulted to the A input. So you're looking at, there's 2 zones of inputs built into the distro. So if you look at that rear view of the rack, you see the 2
Right.
A's on the left and the 2 A's on the right. It's going to default to that A1 connection.
But that's not changeable.
No, it doesn't switch over from there. So that's
Okay.
going to be your monitor input.
And can people volunteer their hardware to be available for the trial? I don't know what that means, but
I don't either.
yeah. Because obviously the trial is the trial of the hardware.
Software.
The software, right? Okay, right.
And you can trial the software for any of these devices or access the public data or whatever it is.
Right, so if you've got one of these, you can plug it into that trial version. I mean, you need some kind of an input device.
Yep.
Or if you've got somebody else's scanner, it doesn't have to be ours, just needs to be a USB compatible scanner. You could plug that in. Otherwise, without an input device, you're just gonna see what you can see.
So if they had a wave tower at their venue and elected to have it public, the visiting RF engineers, they would have to pay wave tower for a subscription to look at it, or can I give them my password?
You could share your login on it. It's not locked down like that.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, if you
Like
want
if they're just a one-time thing, they're coming in from Tanganyika and they want to look at your spectrum, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
As you see, this question about subscription and login is 90% of these questions here, which is very interesting. And obviously, you'll get this list when we're done, but I think people have a lot of concern about that.
accessing the platform.
Which, under what conditions they are, do you have to have the equipment, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think what you probably realize is the people that use Explorers couldn't afford an expensive spectrum analyzer to start with. So now that they have to pay something to use it, they're pushing back. That's all.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Software is an expense. So
And how, if they wanted to just do it monthly, let's say they had a gig coming up in a week, how long did it take to turn that on and off?
It's instant. You can come in and then you get access to downloading the software for your Mac or for accessing
so you can just buy one month if you want to, and then it just goes off, and then the next time you want it, you go into your account you've already set up, turn it on again. They've already got the credit card information. It goes on again. You're done.
Right. You can turn it on and off as you. But I mean, I would encourage people with questions about like access and software and like licensing and all that stuff to contact us directly.
Right. Right.
Sort it out. It's difficult.
And Jason Glass points out the obvious, that if there is a house RF person, somebody coming into the house can say, please send me a CSV of your spectrum there, and you don't need to do the wave tower. But that's a big if there is a house RF person.
Sure.
Okay.
So I mean, I guess just to bring this in for a bit of a landing, Pete, is
Sure.
about managed services and understanding like what are services that you can offer that can be done on a recurring basis. This is I think RF services is really ripe for that because of how much it's changing and because of how difficult and confusing it is for a lot of folks that are on the end user side of it. So the ability to step in or be able to remotely monitor and manage these things, I think is an interesting capability to be thinking about as we go forward here. So yeah, if you want to check out the free trial and sandbox the thing, head over to rfvenue.com and you're free to do that. And we are offering a pre-sale special on these as we're building up this inventory for the remote unit and for the Distro 9 HDR remote, where you get a free year of Wave Tower, which is the $99 value. So you can reach out to me or any of our dealers or distributors that are out there that are most of the usual suspects, if you're interested in that. And if you have any other questions or ideas or feedback or anything, feel free to hit me up. And Don,
I guess he froze up, but you can contact us. He's Chris at rfvenue.com. I'm Don at rfvenue.com. Just our names.
Perfect.
And rfvenue.com.
sorry,
We'll be happy to get back to you.
You do work in Europe. Have you dealt with any of the general data protection regulations over there? Which have to do with how, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, all the data access, is private by account, and so it's opt-in in terms of publicly accessing any of that data. It's fully opt-in.
So I think the question is, if you send this off to somebody to plug into their network on their venue, obviously you need the permission of the people at the venue to plug into their network, but in Europe it's a little tougher than here in the United States.
I suppose it is. I mean, I would assume if you're going to plug anything in on anyone's network that you're going to have to do it. I am not a lawyer.
What?
Well, one of the things I appreciate about RF Venue is, and we've seen that here. Number one, you guys have found these special challenges that are, the RF marketplace, right? And the unique solutions you're providing for that. So number one, I appreciate that because building product is not easy, nor is it cheap. And we're a rough audience, and we're proud of that, honestly.
Oh,
But,
I've been better than this.
yeah, I'm sure you have. But the second thing is that as you were walking through this, as you mentioned, this idea of remote analysis, number one, we all have to think differently. We were talking earlier about what is our work going to look like for the next 6 to 9 months. I fluctuate from, hey, it'll be okay to, oh my God, what am I going to do? And one of the things that we're finding is system integration, right? The opportunity we have, those of us who work in the field a lot, to partner up with these system integrators. That business is going to be coming back. Bring your RF knowledge, bring your understanding. I know subscriptions, these are all really difficult touch points. Software subscriptions, hardware subscriptions, the whole 9 yards. So I don't expect that to answer that easily, but the idea of this remote management, I had a show last year where my my RF A2 and I were going back and forth. Hey, can we put the rack farther from you? And he's like, well, I need to have it here. And then we started listing out all the reasons that we thought we needed to have gear in front of us. And when we got to the end of the list, it was like, well, that's because that's how we've normally done it, right? Once those transmitters were paired, in my case, we were using Axion digital, Axion analog. Once that relationship was made between the receiver and the transmitter, we didn't have to be there. And I'll be honest, it was a really hard, you're so used to a certain way of doing things, right? And I need to have this in front of me. We did Smart last week, Mac, and that one, we're used to quantifying things as mixers or as audio people, and then have the subjectiveness of, well, how's it sound in the room? RF's not like that. RF is science, right? RF is numbers, right?
Yeah.
I know what my threshold is. I know from experience, where this will work, where that won't work. And do I need to be in front of that gear all the time? And I'm talking to myself right now because I am one of those people that's like, all right, I need everything right here where I can get to it.
I'm very similar, but your illustration of the Axient Digital, I mean, once you're using wireless workbench, remote management is part of the package. It's so much easier than having the rack in front of you. It's
right.
It's ridiculous. And this is a step in another, I hesitate to say venue, but, of having the same kind of remote management of RF spectrum analysis.
Right. So
I think that,
yeah.
if venues had these wave towers, it would be fantastic. I mean, can you imagine if MGM Arena and Thomas and Mack Arena and the Venetian Ballroom had
if every venue should have this arena, and the cost of buying that wave tower is borne by the venue, and then everybody else gets free access to it.
And to the cost of the venue, it's not even pocket change. It's
nothing.
It's literally peanuts.
Yeah.
Especially when you weigh that over the, eliminating that one problem that happens once in a blue moon.
Yeah.
There's nothing worse than when that happens, right? You can go all year and you just have that one problem.
And even to to give their clients the ability to pre-plan their event, to know what hardware they need to bring to fit in the spectrum that is going to be there. It just, I think
that being prepared, right? The way we all want to, whether that problem pops up or not, it's the idea that, hey, I went in, I've got my best data, whatever that is, right? The same way I'm going to have patch sheets, the way I'm going to have these pre-cords, right? I have a starting point. Is it going to evolve? Absolutely. And that's okay. Did you, KP had a question around cellular hotspots and the performance of this device over cellular networks. Obviously, I'm going to think as long as the quality of the connection is good enough.
Is it a fairly low bandwidth device? How much bandwidth do you need?
Not much. It's not a big user. I mean, you add a little extra latency. I mean, realize this is a near real time.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Not even, it's not real time. So
you're 10, 20, 30, 50 milliseconds, I don't know, a quarter of a second behind real time if you're looking at the other side of the world, which we have public towers. You can go look at countries all over the world. So, what's a quarter of a second from real time? I'm not that fast anyway, so.
No, unless you're on like an old school 2G setup or something. It's plenty of bandwidth now these days. I mean, I know when we do demos and we're out in the field or whatever, we don't feel like monkeying around with finding the network on site. We just want to be able to just take it out and go. And we've got just a really basic off-the-shelf Verizon box, and it works perfectly. I mean, it's not a massive pipe, but you're not moving video here,
Yeah, simple data points. That I would assume the stream is low megabit, if even smaller, KBs more, actually, because you're not drawing a screen, you're sending data. Again, this integration into buildings right from day one, right? If you're reselling an entire RF system, the cost of including this in that estimate and the potential for whether, as Chris brought up, RF diagnostics as a service, to simply, hey, have this in there. If something happens, right, you've got this. If it's a performing arts center, that seems like just an absolute almost no-brainer, right? Just put it in And
It seems like a good idea, but I think unless it's a venue that is only used by one group all the time, I think you're going to run into a problem where clients do not want the rest of the world to be able to tune in and find out what frequencies their CEO's mic is on.
All the more reason to not allow public access, Pete, and to allow
That's what we're talking about is public access.
Allow access ad hoc, where it's like, hey, approved vendor that's coming in to do here.
Yeah, but a performing arts center isn't in that situation.
Right, or the same thing, a church, you
But
know, they're
even so,
trying to spread the word to hide
if I were any venue, I wouldn't want the general public, unless I pre-approved them, to know what frequencies I had on or running in my venue.
Which is why it's optional.
Yeah.
And you have ways of providing other people access.
Yeah.
That are not public, right? You know, we have accounts with, you know, hundreds of users and their texts that come and go from those companies. And no one ever sees any of that data, but they've got 500, 600, 700 sites, right? And they don't want everyone to have their own account. They want one account to look at all their sites, and then they can manage their users as they come and go. I mean, that's the way to handle it in that scenario. But there's plenty of venues that are like, we don't care. We just want to be able to make it go, you know.
But still, in the example of this company that has hundreds of sites, and they want to let somebody coming in to use that somebody coming in has to pay a subscription for the software before they can come in and use it, right?
Yeah, and in the case of a large enterprise client like that, is, you know,
they should have a bunch of copy licenses they could give out or something.
You can have a different plan.
Oh, and you can grant single users or multiple users permission, and then they don't need to pay.
Really?
Yeah.
No,
so
it's paid per seat, Don. But if you have a single account with multiple users, that's sort of in the enterprise realm of things, which I didn't really get into here. I didn't think we were talking that.
And that's why we have Chris at rfvenue.com. So
exactly.
A lot of those specifics.
So you don't have, the answer is you don't have to have a subscription to look at it if the people give you access.
if you're using this in your church and you've got 3 guys that might be wanting to look at the RF, you just set them up. They don't each need a subscription.
Okay, that's not the example. I have a theater and I have hundreds of different people come into my venue during every year.
Right.
And I want to just be able to give them access to my scanner. Do they have to have a license for Wave Tower?
No, you could grant each one of those on a per email basis address.
Okay. Got it.
And you can take it away as soon as you want too.
And so they use the same software.
Guys, I think we're getting into the weeds on like subscription stuff. I think that would be better kind of handled like into us to understand like what you're trying to do and how to.
Yeah, it's very unclear at this point. But I think it's definitely a question. Is there somewhere on your website that explains it totally, or
Chris at rfvenue.com?
Yeah, that'd be the best place to.
On the website, it's explained.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Let's see. I'm gonna throw one more at you, and then I think we're gonna wind her down. Any plans to expand to 5,900 megahertz to cover interference of audio devices that operate in that band, or to see, you know, again, that 5 gig band, you know, just in general?
So not for the immediate future, but honestly, like the way the platform is configured with how it connects to you know, the handheld units or the standalone, you know, remote units. It's sort of architected in a way that lots of devices could connect into the system, right? So if the next generation, you know, unit scans to 9 gigs, it's the same thing as what we're doing, you know, up to 2,700. So while we don't have anything, you know, specifically planned for that, I would stay tuned for, you know, other data sources that, you know, could be coming online that are, you know, both software and hardware based to feed the.
I think this Wave Tower software may facilitate the selling of this idea to big corporations. Before it was, you know, you buy these boxes and people log into it and they see what it is, the original incarnation. Because people have tried to sell this idea to major studios around the country, where they have 100 studios all over the country, and basically it was rejected. But I think that was before Wave Tower software existed.
Yeah, I think, and it's just one of those things that's going to take time. The IT industry has been doing this for, you know, maybe decades plus, right? And
Same thing.
This is something that as it matures, as it goes along, and that's what makes your company so cool, Chris and Don, is that, you know, these what begin as just a wedge, right? It's like, okay, here's a slot, we see a hole, let's try and develop something, let's fix this problem. And I love this. I love this model. You know, some of this is again about thinking differently. And those tools, I am confident that many of the challenges will be found, and there's going to be plenty of opportunities going forward. And, you know, folks, that, you know, if we didn't get to all your questions here, these guys are going to have a copy of those. And, you know, no doubt I will have a few more questions for you guys at some point for myself. But Pete, Mac, you guys got any more questions?
I don't have any more questions. Well, I actually have a question for Pete. Because Pete was talking about facilities not wanting their wireless exposed to the world, what their frequencies are.
Right.
But as a rule, performance venues don't have wireless. It comes in with the.
No, I'm talking about the individual productions coming in wouldn't want a publicly available wave tower at the venue available to other people.
And they could shut the public access off anytime they want.
So we were talking about if venues bought it to have at their venue, so anybody could check their venue out.
Right.
You know, you'd have to be aware of that and careful about it. That's all.
Right.
Yeah, I think you would make it part of your policy, like you do with all sorts of other things when you have human beings moving through your facility, right? Which is, hey,
we have to have human beings. No,
we have this ability available. Contact us for permission and access.
Yeah. I think it would be a great selling point, no matter how you do it. The venue should have it.
That's why it doesn't default to public, and that's why you're, you know, the way you want to do it. Fine.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yep. And just as an aside, Kevin Paris says, Wi-Fi is going up to 6 gig, so Explorer will have to go up to 6 gig eventually.
Kevin, that is changing very quickly, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it's happening. And of course, you know, then we all have 5G, which is causing all the COVID problems around the world. So
yeah, exactly. Burn down those cell towers.
Hold on, I got some tin foil over here. Hold on a second.
Okay,
that's right. We're going to bring Jason on later. So what you're saying is, with Wave Tower, I could track all the COVID if I can see 5G, right?
No comment.
That's right. I won't drag you into that. That was just for Jason and Henry. I just, you know, that one goes out to those guys. No, 5G does not cause COVID. Well, I think we'll wind it up there before I get us in any more trouble. There were a few more things coming up, but we'll make sure that that Chris and Don get those emails. And Pete, make sure you get your anti-RF COVID filter. I think you still have that at home, right? So make sure you have that.
This is not just green coating. This is an RF filter right there.
Well, I want to make sure that the aliens aren't talking to you again, but that's a different webinar we're going to be doing. So at some point we'll do that. Meanwhile, he'll get his new basket out and life will be good. So thanks everybody for joining us today. Have a great weekend. I'm a horrible radio host because I always make this time and date sensitive, but you know what? I can't help it. we're not looking to make a living at this, at least not right now.
Good
So
thing.
are you
so-
going to promote our show in the next couple of days here?
We are. So let's talk about that just real fast. Monday is esports, right? We're doing a Monday evening, so we can be joined